The rain had started as a whisper of faint, teasing drizzle over the tops of the trees. But by the time the black luxury sedan crept along the winding dirt road, the forest was drowning in a downpour. Thick sheets of rain pounded the windshield, drowning out the sound of the engine, smearing the outside world into a watercolor blur of grays and blacks. Inside the car, the temperature was warm, the leather seats immaculate, but that comfort didn't extend to the tiny figure curled up in the back. A girl no older than 6 lay there, her skin pale and slick with sweat, trembling under a fever that refused to break. Her hair clung to her face in damp, sticky strands. Her lips, once rosy and full of laughter, were cracked from dehydration. A soft, high-pitched whimper escaped her lips now and then, but she was too weak for much else. In the front seat sat a man of impeccable grooming and hardened eyes. Jonathan Grayson, billionaire investor, philanthropist, media mogul. A man whose name was spoken in corporate boardrooms with reverence and in whispers behind closed doors with fear. He adjusted the rearview mirror and glanced at the child. Her fevered face stared out the window with glazed, unfocused eyes. His jaw clenched. His custom suit, tailored in Milan, was soaked at the shoulders. Though the car's heater was on full blast, almost there. He muttered to himself. Not for the child's benefit, she wouldn't hear him. Not because she was unconscious, but because she was deaf, born without the ability to hear even the sweetest lullaby or the cruelest curse. A defect, he called it. A burden, he believed. And now, an obstacle. The car slowed as he reached a small, muddy clearing between towering pines. The GPS showed no road, but he had mapped this route carefully. No one would be out here tonight. Not in this weather. Not at this hour. Grayson stopped the car and turned off the engine. For a moment, the silence was deafening. The rain hammered on the roof like a war drum. He breathed slowly, trying to steady his nerves, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His lips moved, practicing something. Then he opened the door. The wind slapped his face immediately, cold and violent. He flinched but pushed through it, walking to the rear door and yanking it open. The child didn't react. He reached in, roughly scooping her small body into his arms. She whimpered again, barely, but her arms instinctively tried to cling to his neck. That small, instinctual gesture gave him pause. A pause he crushed down violently. He walked into the forest, the mud sucking at his expensive shoes. 20 paces, 40, then deeper still. The trees grew thicker here, the light from the car fading. There was no trail, no shelter. Only the gnarled roots of old oaks and the roar of the rain in his ears. When he reached a gully where the earth dipped low and water pooled, he stopped. Without a word, without a final glance, Jonathan dropped the girl into the mud. Her body hit the ground with a soft splash. She let out a hoarse, broken cry, barely a whisper, but it pierced the air like a siren in his skull. He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't see her reach out. He didn't see the tears mingling with the fever sweat on her cheeks, and he didn't see the pair of eyes that watched silently from the trees. Farther up the slope, half hidden, in a tangle of bushes, stood a creature not many in the modern world would call tame. A white stallion, muscular, regal, eyes dark and intelligent. It had been drawn by the scent of sickness, the stench of betrayal, and the unmistakable thrum of something wrong. The horse took a step forward as the man disappeared into the night. Another step. Then, slowly, it approached the girl. She lay on her side, her tiny chest rising and falling in a regular rhythm. Her fingers twitched. The fever was winning. The stallion knelt. Yes, knelt, lowering his massive body until his muzzle was just inches from her face. He sniffed gently, taking in the scent of her skin, the fever, the fear. His breath warmed her cheek and her eyes fluttered open for a moment, just long enough to see the horses, silhouette against the stormy sky. Then she fainted. What happened next would defy logic, defy science, defy every explanation man has built to separate himself from the beasts. The horse gripped her soaked dress between his teeth carefully, the delicacy of a creature who understood fragility, and began to pull. He dragged her. Gently, step by step, his hooves avoiding sharp stones and tangled roots with uncanny precision. The rain slowed as he walked, the sky calming as if it too held its breath. Half a mile later, he crossed the wooden fence of a small farm. It was old, modest, and almost forgotten by the world. But to those who lived there, it was home. Inside, a barn lit only by a flickering lantern, a girl named Grace Morgan. 21 and stubborn as winter, jolted awake at the sound of hooves and a long Elone, unlike any she'd heard before. She grabbed her coat and boots and ran across the yard. When she opened the barn doors, the sight before her made her gasp and drop the lantern. The stallion stood proudly, his flanks heaving from the effort, and lying at his hooves, shivering and unconscious, was a little girl, barefoot, drenched. And burning up with fever, Grace didn't ask questions. She ran to the child, falling to her knees in the straw. "Dad," we screamed over her shoulder. "Dad, get the med kit." Behind her, her father Nathan Morgan, 55, ex-paramedic, turned farmer burst through the barn door within seconds. "What the ha?" he started, but froze when he saw the scene. "Oh my God." "She's burning up," Grace said, already checking the child's pulse. "I don't know where she came from, but this horse. He brought her here." Nathan didn't question it either. Years of service had taught him to trust action, not appearances. They wrapped the child in blankets, checked her vitals, and carried her inside. As they laid her on the living room couch, Nathan looked out through the rain-slick window. The white stallion was still standing there, watching, guarding, and something about his gaze said this was only the beginning. The little farmhouse was quiet, except for the ticking of an old clock on the wall and the occasional hiss of the storm retreating. Outside, the child lay bundled on the faded blue couch, cocooned in every blanket Grace and Nathan could find. Her lips moved now and then in fevered dreams, but her voice was silent. Her small hands twitched involuntarily, fingers curling and uncurling. As if trying to grasp something lost in the dark, Grace sat beside her, brow furrowed with worry. She dabbed at the girl's flushed face with a cool cloth and adjusted the quilt to keep her wrapped. Across the room, Nathan prepared a pot of herbal tea using leaves he hadn't touched in years, remedies passed down from his mother, a woman. Once known as the medicine whisperer of the valley, "She's still burning up," Grace murmured, brushing sweat-damp hair away from the child's forehead. "Do you think we should drive her to town?" Nathan poured hot water into a chipped mug. "Roads are flooded. You saw the bridge this morning? Half of it's gone. Even if we tried, we'd get stuck halfway. For now, this is all we can do." Grace chewed her lip. "Who would just leave a child in the woods like that?" Nathan didn't answer, not at first. Instead, he walked to the couch and looked down at the child, who looked barely 6. Her features were delicate, as if carved from porcelain, and despite the fever, her face held a quiet dignity that tugged at something deep in his chest. "She didn't get here by accident," he finally said. "That horse he brought her." "Here on purpose?" Grace nodded. "And he's still out there, just standing by the porch, keeping watch." They fell into silence again. The fire in the hearth crackled softly. The warmth was beginning to push the cold from the girl's bones, but the fever was still high. Grace soaked the cloth again, wrung it out, and pressed it gently to the girl's neck. Suddenly, the child stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, vivid, green, unfocused at first, and she blinked up at the wooden ceiling beams, as if they were stars in a sky she didn't recognize. "You're safe," Grace said softly. "You're okay now." But the girl didn't respond. Not with words, not with a nod. Instead, her eyes flicked to Grace's lips, watching them move. And Grace understood. "She's deaf," she whispered. Nathan straightened, brow raised. "You sure?" "She didn't react to my voice at all, but she's tracking my mouth." Grace leaned in closer, slowing her words. "Can you understand me?" The child blinked, and after a long pause, she nodded barely. But it was enough to send relief flooding through Grace's chest. "I think she gets it," Grace said, "but she's too weak to do much." Nathan set the mug down on the side table. "She needs fluids. I'll make a broth." As he stepped into the kitchen, Grace continued speaking slowly, exaggerating her lip movements. "My name is Grace. This is my dad. You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." The girl's gaze held hers, confused but steady. Then, two Graces. Surprise, the child lifted her trembling hand and tapped her chest. "A name, maybe? Are you trying to say your name?" Grace asked. The girl nodded. She repeated the gesture. Her lips moving slowly, no sound, just shape. Grace leaned in closer. "S. Sophie?" The child's eyes widened with recognition. "Sophia," Grace whispered. "Your name is Sophia." Tears welled in the child's eyes. Grace reached out and gently took her hand. "Sophia, you're safe now, I promise." Just then, Nathan returned with a bowl of steaming broth and a spoon. "Try to get her to sip this." They worked in shifts, helping Sophia swallow spoonfuls of warm liquid, wiping her face and keeping her warm. Outside, the storm began to fade, and with it, the darkness that had hung over the little farmhouse seemed to lift ever so slightly. At dawn, the white horse was still standing in the yard, and like a statue carved from snow, Nathan stepped outside to check on him. Bringing an apple in hand, the stallion didn't run. He didn't even flinch. He accepted the fruit with a grace that seemed almost human. Nathan rubbed his hand along the horse's powerful neck. "You knew, didn't you?" he murmured. "You knew she needed help." Horse snorted gently, then looked toward the house, as if he understood, as if he was waiting for more, inside. Sophia had drifted back into a fevered sleep, but her breathing was more even now. Grace sat beside her, sketching on a notepad, trying to find a way to bridge the silence between them. Then came the knock, 3 sharp raps at the door. Grace jumped. Nathan entered quickly from outside, wiping rain from his coat. "You expecting anyone?" he asked. "No." Nathan opened the door cautiously. A tall, well-dressed man stood on the porch holding a sleek black umbrella. He looked utterly out of place. City polished, shoes to clean, smile to practiced. "Good morning," he said smoothly. "My name is Richard Vale. I represent a man who may have lost something important." Grace stepped beside her father. "We're not interested in whatever you're selling." "I assure you I'm not selling anything. I'm here to ask about a child." Nathan stiffened. "What child?" "I've heard there was unusual activity on your land last night. A horse, a girl, perhaps a lost child taken in." "We haven't seen any lost children," Grace said quickly. Richard's smile didn't fade. "I understand your caution, but this is a very sensitive family matter. My client is Mr. Jonathan Grayson. Perhaps you've heard the name." The name hit Nathan like a stone. Of course they had. The man behind half the region's development projects. The billionaire who claimed to uplift small towns while gutting them from the inside. "We haven't seen any children," Nathan repeated. Firmer this time. Richard nodded, but the gleam in his eyes didn't dim. "Well, if you happen to find one wandering about, do let us know. For her safety, of course." As he turned to leave, he paused, glancing toward the yard. "Beautiful horse," he added. "Rare breed." Then he walked off down the muddy path, toward a sleek black SUV parked by the fence. Grace closed the door slowly. Nathan muttered, "Why the hell did he find out so fast?" "Somebody must have told him," Grace said. "Or he's looking for her because he's the one who left." "Her?" Nathan nodded grimly. "She's not going anywhere. Not until we know the truth." Grace returned to the couch. Sophia was still asleep, her cheeks no longer flushed with dangerous heat. She sat beside the child, reached for the notepad, and began to draw a house, a girl, and a white horse standing in the rain. Outside, the horse lifted his head, watching, waiting, knowing. The battle was only just beginning. The sun rose slowly over the Morgan farm, its light golden and hesitant, as though unsure whether it was welcome after the storm. Dew clung to the grass like tears that hadn't yet fallen. And in the stillness of the early morning, the only movement came from the white stallion grazing silently near the port, always close, always watching inside the farmhouse, the air. was filled with the smell of fresh biscuits, lavender, and hope. Grace had hardly left Sophia's side all night, sleeping lightly in a chair beside the couch, her hand resting gently on the child's. When Sophia stirred at last, her small fingers flexing, it was Grace who first noticed. She sat up quickly. "Sophia?" she whispered, not expecting a reply. Sophia's eyelids fluttered open, those green eyes, impossibly deep for a child so young, gazed up at the ceiling before slowly turning to meet Grace's. There was recognition in them now, no fear, only quiet understanding. "You're safe," Grace mouthed slowly. "You're okay." Sophia blinked twice and nodded just barely. Grace smiled and squeezed her hand. "I'm so glad you're awake." From the kitchen, Nathan approached with a bowl of warm oatmeal, carefully prepared with a touch of honey. "Good morning, little one," he said softly, kneeling beside her. Sophia looked at him, then to Grace, unsure. Grace pointed to her lips, then to her own ears, miming a slow and gentle explanation. "He's a friend. This is my dad." Nathan. Sophia tilted her head, studying Nathan with that same sharp, quiet awareness. Then, slowly, she offered a faint, almost shy smile. Nathan's eyes glistened. "She's a strong one." "She is," Grace agreed, then turned her attention back to the child. "Sophia, are you hungry?" The girl nodded, again still slow, still weak. But aware, Grace helped her sit up, fluffing the pillows and steadying her back. She guided the spoon to Sophia's lips and watched as she took small, careful bites. Each swallow was an act of triumph over exhaustion, over fear, over whatever darkness she had endured. As the bowl emptied, Sophia's attention shifted. She looked down at her chest, at the dress she still wore, now dry, but stained from mud and rain. She reached toward her neckline, fumbled, then gave Grace a desperate look. "What is it?" Grace asked, looking down. Then she saw it. A delicate silver chain, tucked under the collar of Sophia's dress. Grace gently reached in and pulled out the object. At the end of the chain, a locket, old and worn, its once polished surface now dulled by time and weather. Sophia's fingers tightened around it the moment it was free, as if she feared it would vanish. Grace opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. One side held the image of a young woman, smiling warmly, eyes filled with light. The other side, a much older woman with soft white hair and the kindest expression Grace had ever seen. Sophia tapped the side with the older woman, then placed her hand over her heart. Grace understood immediately. "That's your grandma," she whispered. "She raised you." Sophia nodded. Grace pointed to the younger woman. "Is this your mom?" Sophia didn't nod. She hesitated, then looked down, eyes misting. Nathan, who had moved to stand behind the couch, asked quietly, "Grace, you think that might be Emily Grace?" Grace turned to him, startled. "The woman who used to run the old bookstore." Nathan nodded. "Had a baby about 6 years ago, remember? And just disappeared? There were rumors she moved away. Some said the father wasn't in the picture." Grace looked back at Sophia, her heart suddenly heavy. "Sophia, is your mommy gone?" The child hesitated again. Then, slowly, she nodded. Grace leaned forward, brushing a tear from Sophia's cheek. "I'm so sorry." Sophia looked away, eyes searching the room, as if expecting the old woman in the photo to walk through the door. When no one came, her small shoulders sagged. Grace reached for the notepad and pencil. "Sophia, can you draw for us? Maybe tell us where you came from?" Sophia's eyes brightened a little and she nodded again. They brought her the pad. And for the next few minutes, the room was silent, as Sophia, still weak but focused, began to sketch. Her hand was steady despite her illness. First, a house. Then a woman in a rocking chair with white hair. A younger woman with green eyes, holding a baby. Then, a man in a suit, his face darkened with harsh lines, standing apart from the rest. Finally, Sophia drew a Kara, sleek black one. She drew herself in the back seat, crying, then trees, rain, mud, and a horse. a magnificent white horse with eyes like hers. When she was done, she looked up at them, eyes wide and expectant. Nathan picked up the sketch pad and studied it for a long time. "She's telling us everything," Grace nodded. "Dad." "But she has a voice." Nathan stood and went to the cabinet. He pulled out a thick phone book, flipped through the pages, and then froze. "Grace," he said quietly, turning the book toward her. "Look at this." There, in the listing for Grayson Holdings, was an address out of state, but familiar. The man who had built half the town's shopping centers, who had tried to buy up the Morgan land a year ago. Grace narrowed her eyes. "You think that's her father?" Nathan nodded grimly. "And I think he's the one who left her." Grace looked back at Sophia, who was now curled up with the sketch pad clutched to her chest. "She can't go back to him," she said firmly. "No," Nathan agreed. "She won't." Just then, a shadow passed by the window. The stallion. He stood there, eyes locked on the living room, ears alert. Grace moved to the window and opened it slightly. The wind carried a strange stillness, the scent of damp earth and something else. Warning, the horse stomped once and gave a low, deep whinny. Nathan appeared at her side. He knows something's wrong. He's watching over her. Suddenly the phone rang. Nathan picked it up. Morgan residence. Day was a pause. Then his voice went flat. "Yes, who is this?"
Another pause then?
"Anything about a missing child?" He hung up, face pale. "Grayson," he said. "He's searching. He's asking all the wrong questions." Grace shut the window. "We need help." Nathan nodded. "I know someone, Miss Beatrice. She used to teach deaf children. If anyone can help us communicate better with Sophia and maybe find her Rekordzitzer, I'll go get her," Grace said, grabbing her coat. Nathan looked out the window again. The horse was still there, standing guard, and behind him, the far edge of the trees, a black car, half-dash hidden, watching the sun had fully risen. But a sense of unease still hung thick over the Morgan farm. The forest no longer roared with the storm, yet its silence now seemed heavier than thunder. There was something about the quiet that unsettled Nathan and the stallion, too. The white horse refused to graze far from the porch, always keeping one eye on the window where Sophia slept and the other on the woods. By mid-morning, Grace returned in a rush with a woman in her 60s seated beside her in the truck's passenger seat. She wore a navy blue cardigan, her hair tucked into a neat bun, and her eyes were as sharp as the first snap of frost in early autumn. This was Miss Evelyn Beatrice, retired educator known across the region not only for her work with deaf children, but also for her relentless pursuit of justice. "Where is she?" Evelyn asked as she stepped out, not waiting for introductions. "In the living room," Grace said, leading the way. Sophia sat quietly on the couch, holding her sketch pad, her eyes wide as she took in the stranger. But when Evelyn walked in and raised her hands in greeting, something in Sophia shifted. Recognition, trust, maybe even hope. Evelyn signed slowly, clearly. "Hello, my name is Evelyn. I'm a friend. You're safe." Sophia's eyes lit up, her fingers moved, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. She knows sign language. Evelyn whispered in amazement, translating aloud for Grace and Nathan. "She says her grandmother taught her, the woman in the photo locket." "Clara," Grace said softly. "That's the name she pointed to. She says Clara raised her after her mother died giving birth," Evelyn continued, watching Sophia's signs with practiced ease. "Her mother's name was Emily, and her father." Evelyn stopped. "What?" Nathan asked. "She says her father didn't want her. Got a letter from Clara 2 weeks ago. Clara told him she was sick, dying. She begged him to take care of Sophia." Grace clenched her fists. "And he?" Evelyn nodded solemnly. "He came to the house, read the letter, looked at her, and said she was broken, defective, that he had a reputation to protect. Then he took her, put her in the car, and she didn't finish. She didn't need to." Sophia's trembling hands had already filled in the silence. Nathan stepped away, bracing himself against the kitchen counter. "My God," he whispered. "He meant to get rid of her." "The horse found her," Grace said. "He saved her." Sophia nodded at that. Her signs were clear. The white horse came. He watched. He followed. He pulled me from the mud. She calls him her angel, Evelyn said. Her voice choked. Says he's the reason she's still alive. Outside the window, the horse stood tall and combat. His ears twitched. He was listening, sensing. Guarding Dud, Evelyn sat down beside Sophia and took her hands gently. You're a brave little girl, she signed. And you're not alone anymore. Sophia looked from her to Grace, then to Nathan, and smiled. A soft, tentative smile. But real Grace couldn't stop herself from kneeling and wrapping her arms around her. She's staying with us, she said firmly, no matter what. But Evelyn's face grew dark. He's not going to give up easily. Men like Grayson don't lose. They buy, threaten, manipulate. If this becomes public, it could destroy his career. His ego won't allow that. Nathan nodded. He's already sent a man snooping around, probably watching the house. Then we need to protect her legally and fast, Evelyn said. I know someone, family lawyer who's handled cases like this. She'll come. But we need more than that. Grace tilted her head. Like what? Proof. Witnesses that Lockett helps. The letter, if we can find it. And her voice. She can't testify, can she? Nathan asked. She's just a kid. She can, Evelyn replied. She can tell her story in signs, in drawings. We can translate. We can document it all. Sophia had picked up her sketch pad again. She began to draw quick, clear lines. First, a man in a suit, cold eyes, a paper in his hand, then herself. In the back seat of a car, trees, rain, mud, the white horse, and, finally, this house. Grace. Nathan, Evelyn. Home, she's telling us the truth, Grace said. That drawing is more powerful than any speech. Evelyn nodded. We'll show them all. We'll show the court, the media, whatever we need to. Nathan exhaled, gripping the windowsill. If he comes here, I won't let him near her. That moment, a low rumble echoed across the field. Not thunder. Engine's 3 black SUVs came up the road, slow but deliberate. Grace moved to the door, heart pounding. That's him. Stallion let out a sharp neigh, loud and clear. Sophia ran to the window, her face drained of color. It's him, Evelyn said. Signing the same words Sophia now mouthed, Jonathan Grayson stepped out of the lead SUV. Impeccable suit, arrogant posture, cold, calculating eyes. He was not alone. 2 men followed, one with a leather briefcase, the other with a badge. A woman in a navy blue skirt suit stood beside them, holding a folder labeled Child Welfare Services. He's brought a lawyer, Nathan said darkly. And a social worker, Evelyn, squared her shoulders. Then it's time we speak the truth. She walked to the porch, Grace at her side, Nathan flanking them like a wall. Grayson smiled thinly. What a lovely morning, he said. May we come in? No, Nathan replied. Say what you came to say. I'm here for my daughter. Grace's jaw tightened. Gotta. You abandoned her in a forest during a storm. Grayson's smile didn't falter. Unproven allegations. I've come to take custody. The woman with the folder stepped forward. We received an anonymous tip about a minor staying on this property, one who may be in danger. Evelyn crossed her arms. That child was brought here by a horse, feverish, abandoned. We've documented everything. She's deaf, Grayson said. She couldn't possibly understand what's happened. From inside the house, the door creaked open. Sophia stood in the entryway, the locket around her neck, sketchpad in hand. She stepped forward slowly, the stallion trotting to stand protectively beside her. Then she raised her hands, and she signed, slow, clear, deliberate. You left me, in the rain, in the dark, I remember, Evelyn translated aloud. The social worker's face shifted from skepticism to shock. Grayson took a step back, blinking. Sophia held up her drawing, the scene of her abandonment. The social worker reached for it, studied it, then looked at Grayson. We'll be investigating further, she said firmly. The child will remain in temporary protective custody here, pending review. Grayson's face twisted, but he said nothing. He turned and got back into the SUV, slamming the door. As the cars pulled away, the stallion let out another loud, echoing Nail's warning now, or declaration. Sophia turned to Grace and smiled. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Autumn had settled over the valley like a well-worn quilt, cool, crisp and quiet. Leaves turned amber and gold, fluttering down onto the gravel road that led to the Morgan farm. At the edge of the property, the great white stallion stood like a monument, his mane rippling in the breeze, his eyes always trained on the house. Inside, preparations were underway. The living room had been transformed into a makeshift command center. Papers were spread across the table, sketches, legal documents, photos. The silver locket sat in the center. Glinting faintly in the morning light, Sophia sat at the table with her sketch pad, drawing silently as she had every morning since the storm. Beside her, Miss Evelyn Beatrice signed slowly, clearly, guiding Sophia through questions the lawyer had prepared. "Do you remember what your father said when he left you?" Evelyn signed. Sophia nodded. She signed, "He said I was broken, that he didn't want people to know I was deaf, that I would ruin everything." Grace sat nearby, fists clenched under the table. Nathan rose and walked to the window, watching the dirt road that led into town. "Today's the hearing," he said. "If we win custody, she stays with us for good. And if we don't," Grace asked, unable to hide the tremor in her voice, "we fight harder." Sophia stopped drawing. She stood and walked across the room to where her backpack sat near the couch. She pulled something from it, a folded envelope, worn and creased. She handed it to Evelyn. The letter Evelyn whispered. Grace leaned in, the one Clara sent to Grayson. Evelyn unfolded it carefully. The writing was shaky, but clear. "Jonathan, I don't have much time left. The doctors say my heart is failing. Emily is gone, and Sophia has no one but me. Please, she's your daughter. She needs her father now more than ever. I beg you take care of her. She's bright, she's kind. And yes, she's deaf. That does not make her less. Please, don't turn your back on her. Not like before." Clara, there was a smudge at the bottom, either a tear or a fingerprint. It didn't matter. The letter said everything. Evelyn folded it again. "This is enough." Combined with the drawings, the testimony, the locketites, more than enough. But still, they all knew Grayson's influence. His money, his power, his ability to manipulate. Sophia signed something quietly. Evelyn translated, "Even if they send me away, I know where I belong." Grace swallowed hard and reached for her hand. "You're not going anywhere." The courtroom in town was modest wooden pews, a tired-looking judge, and dust motes dancing in sunbeams. But for Sophia, it might as well have been a cathedral. She sat between Grace and Evelyn. Across the aisle sat Jonathan Grayson, flanked by two attorneys in dark suits and a woman from child welfare. The judge cleared his throat. "We're here today regarding the custody and welfare of a minor child, Sophia Grace. This court has received substantial evidence and sworn affidavits regarding the child's recent abandonment, medical condition, and current placement." Grayson's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Grayson acknowledges that he is Sophia's biological father. However, he categorically denies abandoning her. He claims the child wandered off during a visit." Evelyn stood. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the child is deaf. She cannot hear danger. And she was left in the woods during a violent storm in the middle of the night." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Does the child wish to address the court?" Evelyn looked to Sophia, who stood slowly. She walked to the front. Her sketch pad clutched tightly. She placed the first drawing on the judge's bench. The forest, the rain, the car. Then the next, the white horse pulling her. Then another. The Morgan farm, the couch, Grace and Nathan. And finally, a picture of herself standing between the stallion and Grace, both hands held. The judge looked up. "She wishes to stay?" he asked. Sophia nodded. She signed. Evelyn translated. "I want to live where I'm safe, where I'm loved, where I can be who I am." Grayson stood abruptly. "She's a child. She doesn't understand." The judge held up a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Grayson." Then he turned to Sophia. "Young lady," he said, "I don't think there's anything wrong with you at all. In fact, I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met." He looked at Grace and Nathan. "This court grants full and permanent custody of Sophia Grace." 2. Nathan and Grace Morgan. Gasps. Applause. Sophia ran back to Grace, who swept her into her arms. Nathan stood, tears in his eyes. Grayson slumped in his seat. Outside, the sky was clear and bright. The white stallion stood in the parking lot, as if he'd been waiting. Sophia ran to him and threw her arms around his neck. The judge watched from the courthouse steps. He murmured, "Angels come in all forms, I guess." 3 months later, the Morgan farm was no longer just a farm. It was becoming something more, a sanctuary. A new sign stood at the entrance. Whitehaven, a healing place for children. Children arrived every week, many deaf or nonverbal. Horses greeted them, gentle and patient. And always Sophia was the first to welcome them. She taught them signs, she showed them how to ride, and always the white stallion Echo, they now called him, stood. By her side, Evelyn returned weekly to teach. Grace and Nathan had legally adopted Sophia, and on her birthday, they gave her something special, Pendant, inside it, a new photo, her with Echo, with Grace and Nathan. A family. She signed a word she had made up forever. That night, as the stars stretched over the fields and the wind whispered through the grass, Sophia sat in the paddock with Echo, her back against his warm flank, watching the children laugh and play in the moonlight. She was home, and home was where she had always belonged. The end.